thank my lucky stars to be living here today. 'Cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.
You're listening to Wild About Liberty on KXEX 1550, where we discuss the importance of our liberty and how to preserve it. Now, here's your host, Terry Wild.
Thank you very much for tuning into our program. You're going to want to hear what our guest has to say. Ellington Smith is with us in the studio, and he has some awareness, and he keeps up with events that are going on that are pretty dramatic. You're going to hear what he has to say about the banking situation, the economy, the border. There's just a lot of things going on, and that really is the purpose of our program. Wild About Liberty. We're here because we want to bring the community together. We want to join with what other groups and organizations are doing in Fresno County and across the state and across the country. In other words, we want to win the election in 2024 because we know how important it is if we don't. So let me introduce our guest, Ellington Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, you've been a guest and a speaker at Liberty Coalition a number of times, and without exception, it's been so helpful to know and to get the information that you have. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from.
Okay, I started my career when I got out of the Army. I was drafted during Vietnam, came back, went to Fresno State, finished up Fresno State, went to work for General Electric, and I was putting computers on nuclear power plants. That was and I had to learn to spell both, computer and nuclear. And from there it grew into all kinds of industrial control systems, power grid control systems. And then I got smart and got into banking, had an opportunity to work on securing electronic funds transfers globally, and was with GE Bull out of France, working with SWIFT in Brussels, and they were doing the integration of their global exchange at that time. Then I came out and worked on helping prime contractors become get into e-commerce, and so I spent a lot of time consulting with prime contractors. Got into doing product development for security companies, and my specialty was embedding covert data into data from a software point of view. So I had my own company for a while, and got out of it when my wife got sick. So that's kind of the history.
Well, tell us what that means, covert data.
You take a carrier subject like an image or a Word document, and inside of that you embed other information which you really want to look at.
Subliminal type?
Yeah, it's kind of like a watermark, only it's a hidden watermark, and you can actually put executable code in there. So I can send you an image of a tree, and it actually has a program embedded in it.
And that affects us how?
Basically, it secures your communication, because a lot of people don't know that image, they see the image, but they don't know that it's carrying the message.
That's interesting.
And you can do it with voice files. You can do it with Word files, PDF files. And it's a great way to handle exchange. I developed some stuff in blockchain, which is the digital format for digital currency. And I put embedded data into NIFs, which basically allows you to assure the originality of the authorship. And so when you hear a lot about AI today, they're talking about watermark, but what they're talking about isn't suitable, and it isn't really going to protect the public and validate that the information you're getting was from the original author.
Well, I think we're both probably came from the old school, and we have reluctantly been dragged into this whole new technology that is pretty crazy. I mean, the AI world has actually happened now, and it's about to come out in a serious way. How do you see that whole AI thing?
Actually, I think from a scientific point of view, AI is very good. Medical systems, diagnosis, things like that, it really assists in real time. Where it goes bad is when you're doing searches and it draws information from databases that have skewed information in it, or information that is not factual or correct, and it treats it as if it is. And so when you get a report on census or something like that, if it's using biased information, it doesn't know that it's biased, and it just assembles it together
As though it were true.
And so it can be used as a tool to counter opposition. It can become very dangerous in social media in creating content that isn't necessarily valid or true to fact.
Well, Elon Musk is an interesting guy. I mean, he's just amazing. And so he spent months warning everybody about AI, yet he was one of the originators of developing AI and bringing it to the level that we know of it now. And then it's like he resisted. Now he's come out full tilt with an AI product. Are you aware of that?
Yes. And I think there's ways of being able to validate AI, and it goes back to using what I just talked about, steganography, embedding content in content. And it's not just a watermark, but it's a way of validating that the source of the information actually came from the originator and isn't something that was buried in that somebody is using.
And that's the good side.
And that's the good side. And that needs to become prevalent within the conservative community. Emails, things like this, need to be secured in a way that you can validate that the content is indeed the original content from the author.
I didn't know that. And so, there's so many things that come through the pipeline. You don't know if it's true or if it's accurate, but a lot of people are saying that this might be the last human election we're ever going to have because of AI. What's your take on that?
That is very possible. The whole warfare of misinformation and how it's used can change a whole society. It's the social tool that can be implanted, and it sets up a mindset. We're seeing a lot of that having to do with the demonstrations on campus these days. And part of that is the misinformation generated by social media, not necessarily AI, but AI uses content from databases, and when it compiles stuff, puts it together, it's using information that it can be biased, and you don't know the difference.
Well, that's another layer of what's going on in the political realm. I'm 77 years old, so I think I've been through 8 presidents or more. From Truman was the president when I was born, and he was the president till I was 8 years old. And then came Eisenhower and Kennedy and all the other ones. But, that's another world. We've come from a level of technology and where people lived, at least pretended to live, in an honest way and, straight up. But today, I mean, in this political world, they don't even care if you know they're lying.
Exactly.
It's frightening.
The thing that we're seeing take over circumvents governments altogether. It's that the digital role plays in the major corporations, and they can actually influence the outcome from a marketing point of view using AI. And that same thing applies to voting. The same thing applies to what's going to happen to digital currency.
That's a big one. That is really, really huge.
The average citizen has no control over it. Like the digital currency, that whole aspect is controlled by the Federal Reserve.
What can people do in that area to protect themselves? How can we protect our lives, actually, from what you're talking about?
If I really had the answer to that, I'd be very rich. But I think we have to start concentrating on an alternative economy, very much so. The whole point of the World Economic Forum points to the year 2030 of some significant things happening in government land grabs, where digital currency is, the global currency, globalization. And we need to be preparing right now for it. And you hear a lot about survival gear and things like that. Well, carrying on commerce is just important, and you need to have an alternative way of making payments. You got to have almost like a bartering system, but regulations through IRS and everything will try to get a hold of it. So it has to be basically like an underground economy to survive.
Well, that takes us to where I really want to go with this program. And I find it very difficult to bring the spiritual element alongside of just the natural world that we live in and our everyday life. And yet there's this other dimension, this other aspect of our lives. That's the spiritual aspect. That's part of the way, if you're a Christian, then you know that God made us spirit, soul, and body. We live in a natural world. We abide by natural law. If you don't believe me, jump off a 20-story building and I can guarantee you what's going to happen. So there's natural law. But yet the spiritual part of us, and if we are Christians and we believe who God says he is, who Jesus Christ says he is, then we know that we have to operate at some level in this spiritual realm and make it part of the whole process of living on planet Earth. This is where we were, this is the world God created. This is the environment we live in. And that spiritual component means, in my mind, for example, all of these prophecies at one time about the end times couldn't be imagined. But now look at AI, for example. That opens up another scope that is so bewildering. We could never have believed that we would have this technology, but we have to find a way to function within our spiritual part of our life and understand it.
Well, the Bible talks about the end times and the principalities, and AI certainly allows the spread of the concept of principalities and the mindset. The flip side of that for the Christian community is that they are going to have to be more dependent upon gifts of the Holy Spirit within their lives on a daily basis. They're going to have to draw closer to their faith and be able to discern good and evil on a direct basis.
Yeah, and that opens up, and this is the discussion I wanted to have also with you, because you do have a strong background in the economy. We want to talk more about the banking. We want to talk about all these other things, but I want to do it in the context that God isn't a pacifist. He's not just standing by idly. God's involved in every aspect of life, every day, every minute of every day. And so that has to be considered. But, what you said, depending on the Holy Spirit and the spiritual tools that God has given us, then there's the abuse side. And those very gifts that we need are abused so badly by some people that it's like, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to have to rely on that part of life when the abuses are so bad, the misuse of spiritual things are so bad, the misrepresentation, it's pretty threatening.
Yes, I think that's the positive side of crisis. A lot of people fall to their knees and start seeking a higher power when you have a crisis. And I think the Christian community, which has a lot of conservatives in it, I think it creates a situation where they can serve their fellow man in a greater way in a spiritual capacity as well.
Well, that is the goal that we all share as Christians, is to mature in the things of Christ, to know more about the Word of God, how to apply it, how it works. And so as we're going along, we want to be able to connect those things together. So in the area of, I would say the prophetic calendar is ticking. And we've reached a point of what people are calling globalization. There's an organized group of people, and they are trying to manipulate us in different ways. And that brings in another character that is also bewildering and controversial, and that's the devil. So we know there's a God, he's a good God, and we have all this information, and we need to learn all we can about God. But then there's this other spiritual element called Satan and demons. So those forces, they're not passive, they're active every day, they're involved, we're involved with them every day, they affect our lives every day. How do you see that connection between the economic movement that is going towards a global economy, a one world government?
Well, I think a lot of it has come out of Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
And I think anybody who, I recommend that you visit the World Economic Forum website and look up the corporations that are members.
Do you know that website number?
I think you can just Google it.
Yeah.
World Economic Forum. But when you go to that website, you'll be amazed at the number of companies that have joined in on the World Economic Forum. And why did they join in? Because they're working in a global economy, and the U.S. is not significant in the global economy anymore. We're losing ground quickly. The banking system is basically now controlled by just a few people. When I say few, under 100. And we are seeing corporations falling in line with the World Economic Forum rules. They're not necessarily regulations, but they're ways to follow to create wokeness, to create a one view society globally, and also create an economy globally.
How far are we away from that?
That's a good question. Let me just answer that by giving you an example, if I can.
Sure.
I followed the Federal Reserve from Paul Volcker Then we had Alan Greenspan. Greenspan had the dot-com collapse. He also had the housing market collapse.
Oh, boy.
Then Bernanke came in, and then Yellen came in. And one of the things that Yellen did before she became Secretary of Treasury, she signed an agreement, a non-compete agreement, with BlackRock to manage all the Federal Reserve assets. And in the managing of all the Federal Reserve assets, that's managing Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. It's managing all the Federal Reserve bond purchases of corporate bonds off Wall Street. It's managing all of the Federal Reserve money supply. They set the interest rates. They dictate to all the banks. Now, that is in effect right now. BlackRock controls 12.5% of all home mortgages. That's a huge amount of money. They're running close to $30 trillion in management power, but I think they themselves are about 17 trillion or somewhere in there.
Good grief.
Might be less than that. I haven't looked for a while, so I don't have an update on that. But when you wield that kind of power, you go into the major corporations and you invest $1 billion or $50 billion. I think they have $26 billion into Microsoft. I'm wrong on these numbers, but it's like $30 billion in Apple. Google is about $18 billion. Well, when you invest that kind of money, you have a seat on the board. So they not only have a seat on the board where they control the wokeness, like they happened to Exxon Corporation, where Exxon had to spend out $3 billion on green energy research and everything. And that was all caused because BlackRock sat on the board, one of their people. The other thing that is happening is they not only sit on these boards, but they also, through the bond market, control the debt. So they're working both ends of a corporate balance sheet, and that yields a lot of power. And so these corporations have to yield to that power. And that globalization, the wokeness, the things that we're seeing are forcing society and limiting what society can do relative to a free economy, a capitalistic economy. The side of that is we're seeing the effect of right now is that part of the World Economic Forum is putting a squeeze on banks so that a country has no more than about 6 major banks. We're seeing that happen now.
That's amazing. That's scary.
$84 billion, billion with a B, exited JP Morgan, Chase, Citicorp, and Wells Fargo over the last 3 months.
Now, how can that happen? How can that be extracted?
Was Middle Eastern money that was on account in these banks, and they pulled out.
They were working off.
They pulled out their accounts. Like Saudi Arabia had money in J.P. Morgan, and so they pulled this money out gradually over 3 months. I've heard numbers as large as 100 billion, but 84 billion is what I work with because that's what I have. So they're putting a squeeze now. Wells Fargo has just announced, excuse me, that it is going to close a lot of branches in California, and this is part of
because of that.
And not only that, some of their dealings are now under SEC investigation.
Wow!
And so we're seeing these banks come under constraints now that is going to end up affecting customers.
I want to ask you to talk about. We hold Liberty Lunch every Wednesday at Liberty Coalition, where we're speaking from, every week. And so for 4 years, we've had Liberty Lunch Wednesday from 12 to 1:30. In fact, this might as well be a good time for a commercial. if you're listening and you want to hear more and be involved in some of the things that we're talking about, Liberty Coalition is a faith-based political organization. We've been here for 4 years. We're at 1123 Railroad Avenue. That's at Railroad in Barstow, near Clovis and Barstow. And so we have speakers and we have people from different groups and organizations talk and strategize and try and work together to represent Christian Judeo values in government. So if you're interested and you want to come by and check out what we're doing, it's every Wednesday, 12 to 1:30, Liberty Coalition, 1123 Railroad Avenue. But you spoke at that one time.
Yes.
And more than one time. And you described to us, and I want our listeners to try and understand briefly, if you could give us a little explanation. You described how the Fed has turned over a huge amount of the Federal Reserve Bank money to BlackRock. That's one thing that you spoke about. And then, who the heck is BlackRock?
BlackRock was started by Larry Fink, and Larry Fink was in the financial business in Van Nuys, California. He was with an investment or an equity firm that went under, and then he all of a sudden popped up as starting BlackRock, and this was in the late 90s, 1990s, and that's kind of where it originated. And what they did is they started managing retirement funds for states, different states. They managed union funds for unions. Then they branched out. They manage funds for the King of Jordan. They're in Dubai. And so they manage a lot of the Middle Eastern accounts. And the funny thing about that is, and I don't mean to be anti-Semitic here, but they're all Jewish, but they're doing business with Middle East. And
which are their sworn enemies.
Well, supposedly, you know.
Right.
Many speak with forked tongue.
Yeah.
So anyway, BlackRock just gained power through managing assets of others in these retirement funds, reinvesting them, and they built up quite a bit of wealth that way. And so now, when they take over and manage the assets of the Federal Reserve, it even gives them the ability to dictate what monetary policy is. And Janet Yellen, who's now Secretary of Treasury, she was chairman of the Federal Reserve before Jerome Powers. And so you end up with this whole group that is controlling corporations. They control a lot on Wall Street. The New York Stock Exchange is all controlled by the same group. 3 of
the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country are substantially owned by Vanguard and BlackRock.
And
and they set the policy, the woke policy about the COVID vaccine, and on and on and on.
Yeah, exactly. So I consider this a hijacked economy because the free market no longer exists. It's a manipulated market.
Right.
And
in what way? How do you explain that? How would people understand that? How would I understand that?
You have to understand that your monetary policy is all dictated by a small group of people. And
including the Federal Reserve, right?
Yeah, and when they move into digital currency.
Perfect segue, though.
Yeah.
My understanding of the Federal Reserve Bank is that it's owned by a lot of foreign entities. How did it get created, the Federal Reserve Bank?
Oh, it got created back in, I think it was 1914, and it was Jekyll Island, Georgia. And if you want to read a good book of it, it's called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it gives you a good background on the creation of the Federal Reserve.
And what year?
1914, I believe it was.
So we went from 1776 to 1914 without a Federal Reserve Bank.
That's correct, because each bank could issue their own kind of currency.
Right.
In the Depression, you had a lot of that happen.
Sure.
And the U.S. Treasury managed its own money.
Right.
And they didn't want politicians managing money. So they created the Federal Reserve.
And that
to
was
oversee
with
the
foreign
bank.
entities, right?
Yes.
What?
Not necessarily foreign interest. It was driven by J.P. Morgan.
Okay.
And J.P. Morgan led the group on Jekyll Island to form the Federal Reserve.
Got it.
And they brought together a group of bankers, and they all agreed to have the Federal Reserve as the nation's central bank, basically, and establish the banking rules for all of the members.
Well, you know, it's funny how you remember things, because the whole idea of the Federal Reserve Bank to me was this group somewhere that we don't have any idea really where they are. Excuse me. And somebody from the government calls up and says, we need $3 billion. Where did we get it? So the Federal Reserve says, we'll give it to you. They push a button, they transfer some number into an account, and then they start taking all the interest. I mean, it's a scam.
There's a lot to be said about the Federal Reserve in a number of ways, but what happens is the U.S. Treasury, you see the printing press running. The printing press doesn't print money that goes through the Federal Reserve. It's primarily replenishing money that is taken out of circulation.
So it's an IOU.
So the new money, like when Biden gives $100 billion away, what they do is U.S. Treasury authorizes and transfers like a bond to the Federal Reserve. They put the bond on the market. They use the bond as an asset, and from that asset, they create currency within the local membership banks. And the membership banks then get credit, they debit the accounts, and then they
but
credit.
There's no money going anywhere. In other words,
it's all
just
electronic.
Electronic. I mean, I could be the Federal Reserve Bank and just, I wish people would call me. Can you send me a number? And then I can print all this money. I mean, that's what a deal that is.
It works a little different than that. But
I'm sure it does. I'm being facetious. But, you know, this is a good point. So we're talking about, how does God fit into all this? What does that mean? We have a God who's holy and just. We have a devil who's a dirty rat, and he's trying to kill and steal and destroy. Do you see the connection?
Absolutely.
And how does that work? How do you see that actually realistically being done?
Money has become God to a lot of people. They're secure, they're safety when they have a lot of money. On the other hand, people who are in debt and can't get out of debt are beholden to money. So money plays both ends of the element. And the more you put the squeeze to create people in the bottom end, the more dependent they are on the government to supply their needs. So this all replaces God and the peace that God gives with the peace that money gives, or the worries that money create.
Now, do you see the evil working in the formation of the banking, not the banking system, but the financial economic realignment that's taking place in the world, and that is causing the EU in these countries? We're trying to be this collective one world thing.
Yeah.
Where does the evil apply to that?
Exactly. Where we're seeing it is the Eastern community has, and I'm taking Russia, China, all of the Middle East, have become opposed to the control that the Western banks have had on international trade. For that reason, you had Russia and China, Brazil, South Africa, and India develop a thing called the BRIC. And the
That's
BRIC
right.
is cleared through Russia. They set up an exchange for it, and they're using that for getting around sanctions and trading in international oil.
Which really is a replacement of the U.S. dollar that was the king
As a
of the
reserve.
world economy.
It will be. It's not quite to that stage yet, but you're absolutely right. It will be. And so the West has been an inhibitor for world government.
By the way, I'm coming up with all these questions because I remember what you said when you spoke at Liberty Lunch.
Oh.
So I have this fresh in my mind.
I don't have notes in front of me, but what has happened is the U.S. and the capitalistic free economy stands in the way of the globalist, and so as they erode that away, it makes a shift, and the U.S. sooner or later will become very isolated economically.
On purpose? Who's doing that?
Russia, China, India, Brazil, they're all onto the BRIC. When the BRIC started, South Africa was in it. There were 5 countries that had signed on, and at my last check, there was 97 countries that were trading in BRIC. Saudi Arabia joined in on it. So it's a fascinating subject, and there's a lot more to it. And we're not hearing about any of this in the news. You know, it's not being covered. Nobody's discussing it. You hear about the financial crisis that is getting ready to go. J.P. Morgan's Demon has talked about it. He says that things are going to get really tough. With the extraction of $84 billion. Well, Wells Fargo is about $1.9 trillion in assets. And so that's not that much, it's a small percent. But it's happening. And the reason inflation can't get under control is that you have countries dumping the dollar. And dumping the dollar is the same as manufacturing, printing dollars. It comes into the market, and you have no control over it.
Right.
So the inflationary thing and the spiral that's creating is not caused by the spending and everything we're doing. It's caused a lot by the dumping of the dollar on the market.
Which the average person wouldn't get this. I don't, get it. And so, for you who are listening right now and have an interest in what we're saying on this program, we're just trying to live our life. We're just trying to make it from paycheck to paycheck, and all this world drama and everything that's going on is so far removed from what we know or understand. But there is a critical need that I want to mention. For years and years, there's been a spiritual apathy that has taken hold of, they call it Western Christianity, or Christianity in the United States. We've become complacent, we become lazy, we take up interests of all kinds of sports and recreation and hobbies, and there's nothing wrong with that, unless you're neglecting God, unless you're neglecting the Word of God, unless you're neglecting assembling yourself together with other Christians and taking the world seriously. And that's, I think, the message that I hear. Everything you're saying to me is like reminding me that we can't survive if we're ignorant. We're going to be, the whole point of Satan is to deceive. And then you look at, in my opinion, the whole Biden administration is one massive machine of lies and deception and manipulation. I mean, it's astonishing. Yet, all this is going on, and it's affecting all of us right now. It's affecting our lives and our future and the welfare of our children. Our children are being indoctrinated. They're being told things that just aren't true. But the Bible is our light. The Bible is our truth. We have to be in prayer and in union with God and in connection with God, because that's where our illumination comes from. And what we really need in today's world more than anything is truth and reality. And reality is in short supply. So when you're talking about this, the media doesn't cover it. Well, so what does that mean? We're being cut off. Our information pipeline is being cut off. No one is commentating on these events from the media, the mainstream media. So this program was created. The whole reason we're talking behind this mic right now is because we're trying to get information out to people. And what you're telling us is so important, mainly because it just reminds us we better take this seriously. We better take some time out and seek out the truth. So where do you go for your news? Where do you go for your information? The mainstream media isn't giving it to us. Where do you find it?
Most of it comes from firsthand experience, because I was in the system business, got involved with Swift in Brussels, doing system integration. The CAPS project in New York is basically an international exchange, currency exchange. And I followed this almost from an insider point of view. And that's been years ago. But the fact is, a lot of the things that I saw are now in effect. And so, I tell these things not to create anxiety at all, but to create an awareness, because we have to depend on the Lord for peace, and peace is part of the gifts that we're given.
And truth is the thing that sets us free, the biblical truth, but also the awareness of the reality and what's going on around us.
Yeah, and we're hit with so much right now that it's hard to sort through, and it keeps everybody confused and on edge.
One of the things that affects me, I've known Guillermo Marino and his mom, Lisa, for years. We've been listening to KXEX radio station, this radio station that we're talking on, for years. And it seems like the left, call it the evil force out there, have it so easy in terms of money, resources, being able to get their message out, being able to affect people. And yet we're struggling, and I know KXEX has worked very hard to get this radio station up and running. We have such great programming. We have Pastor Jim Franklin, we have Dennis McCourt, we have Eric Rowland, we have our beloved Alan Autry, who we just love dearly here. And so KXEX is doing a lot to try and counter the fact that the mainstream media just isn't giving us the right information. So I would really encourage people to support this radio station, support this program, and do anything you can to support it. Financially, you could donate to different groups. I know Eric's group is the Constitutionalists for California. Our group is Liberty Coalition. There's the CRA, the NRA. All these people need help and support, and they need to get their message out. So that's why this program, Wild About Liberty, I think is needed. You know, we want to be forced to bring the community together. We want to encourage and support each other. And so we're going to keep doing this every day, Monday through Friday, Wild About Liberty. And we're also helping other people we know who have a dynamic gift and message to get on the radio here. And so if you're an advertiser, give us a call. We'd love to have you advertise on KXEX, and one of the programs or more than one of the programs would benefit. And let's get this message out. Let's get your message out, Ellington. You know, I've known you now for years, and there has never been a time that you've spoken that I have not been overwhelmed with the fact that nobody knows the stuff that's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we better treasure this. We treasure you already. But people in this audience, they need to hear more. So you're going to be coming on regularly, and as much as we can talk you into it. And so people have a way to look forward to at least getting some of the local information in addition to what Ellington's talking about. We're going to have a daily news update, a community calendar of events on our website, which is, by the way, wildaboutliberty.com. It's just a fledgling website right now, but it won't be long before you can really get a lot of good information. We're building it, and all this takes time.
Yeah.
But it's being done with very few resources, especially money, which if I had the number of BlackRock or the Fed, I'd just call them and say, why don't you throw a few numbers our way?
Well, the benefit of that is that it keeps everybody humble.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
And you know, you get people who volunteer to come in and speak, cover a range of topics. The talent that has spoken at Liberty Coalition lunches, along with some of the other groups, have been amazing. Gives you insight. Just the Farm Bureau coming in the other day.
Wasn't that a great show?
Was great.
Oh,
and,
man. Makes you proud to be a Fresnan.
So broke and humble is, it's not all that bad.
Tell us, how did you come to Christ? What brought you to Jesus Christ?
I was raised in an Assembly of God church, and I grew very indifferent. I was a loner. I was raised by my grandmother, and I became very indifferent. My indifference was my survival through a lot of life situations.
Sure.
And then I was down in Houston. I worked for, I headed up the marketing area for Texas Instruments Systems Group, and I started going to church, and then I had a deliverance from indifference.
How
and
cool.
You don't hear people talk about having a deliverance from indifference, but indifference by itself is worse than hate because you have no feeling.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I didn't get on the wrong side of the fence. I had enough basic Christian understanding that I was not doing things wrong, but I had no feeling. And so with that deliverance became a real infilling of the Holy Spirit, and that basically changed my life.
And it really is opening of the eyes, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I remember my brother, Dave, I'm the youngest of 8 kids, 5 older sisters, 2 older brothers. And I was in Germany at in Dachau concentration camp for 3 years, and I get these letters. Well, you're coming home soon, but you better be aware something's happened to Dave.
Yeah.
He's really religious now. And I thought, oh boy. And so I came home, and he got all over me and was telling me Jesus loves me, has a plan for my life. And I didn't show it, but I was really moved by some of the things he was saying. And I wanted to see, but I couldn't. I went to church, mainly. He said, do you want to meet Miss South San Francisco? I said, okay. So I went there to do that, and ended up marrying her sister, my wife, Georgia. And so, but I remember really trying to understand all this. I couldn't put it together. And then one day, I was reading the Bible by myself, and the heavens opened up. I saw Christ.
Yeah.
It touched my heart. It changed my life. I went into a Christian commune in Haight-Ashbury in 1969, stayed there for a year, gave everything I had away, my cars, my clothes, my record, album collection. Oh, my God. And just wanted Jesus. I didn't want anything else. But a year in the ivory tower, then you have to come down and go into reality. But I wouldn't go back to that life on purpose for anything.
Yeah, the things that have added to that is the fact that I've been pronounced dead twice.
Really?
Once was the first time it happened, I was playing racquetball at Mercer Island in Seattle every morning before I went to work. And I'd get this little ache up in the chest. And a neurologist friend, we had lunch, and he says, you're going to go to my cardiologist. They did, and in the middle of an angiogram, I conked out.
Whoa.
I watched myself die on the table.
Wow.
And that experience was probably the most valuable experience I could ever have. And the truth of what salvation is and what Christ is very, very real.
It is very real.
And the second time it happened, I was doing a workout in Porterville in the morning, and I was dating my wife, dating my girlfriend who became my wife, and we were doing a workout at the gym, and I collapsed, and that was the vagus nerve shutting down.
Whoa.
And there's no drug that works with the vagus nerve when it shuts down. And the same thing happened, and it was a reconfirmation of the realities of the spiritual side.
You know, that's the whole point, isn't it? God is real.
Yeah.
You know, he's here. He isn't wandering off somewhere. He's engaged. He knows everything we do. He cares about us. And yet he has a standard that he can't break.
Yeah.
You know, he has to let people be free to do what they want to do and have a free will. That creates all kinds of misery for themselves and others. But, you know, it's really heartbreaking. You know the truth. You've experienced the truth. I've experienced healing. I was electrocuted in the bathtub. I inadvertently brought a lamp into the water, and my spirit was leaving my body, and I saw Satan in the room, and I thought I was dead, and my wife was 9 months pregnant, and she came in and grabbed the lamp, and she got electrocuted, and it just blackened and blew the plug out of the wall. We had an old fuse box, it screwed in.
Yeah.
And so you have these experiences. I've never doubted. I mean, there was a point, you know, it's 50 years I've been a Christian, but there came a point somewhere along the way, I just stopped doubting. I've never had a doubt in 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And because you experience that firsthand, just like you're dead on the table, and yet God gives you life again.
Yeah.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, it ended up, I had a 5-way bypass.
Oh, boy.
And so these experiences all add to the character add to your character, your faith. It makes it stronger.
It does.
And when you share things like this firsthand with non-believers, it makes them think about a little bit about where they are.
We hope so, don't we? That's really our first mission, is to take the gospel into all the world and make disciples. But that is another. Well, we're going down this road, so I'll bring out something that really helped me and change my whole outlook on everything. When George and I came here 4 years ago, we didn't really know exactly what we were doing or how we were going to be involved. And so we knew Liberty Coalition, we were here to try and affect change. And I remember telling the Lord, but I don't see it. You're God, you get to see it, but it doesn't look good to me. And it doesn't look like this is going to do much good. And it was like the Lord just made me think, just do your job. I'll handle the big stuff. You just get up every day, go to work, do your job, and I'll do the rest. And then we began to have people come in here for Liberty Lunch, and there were some real conflicts with different people and just attitudes and my attitude. So after year, we began to realize that the whole value of what we're doing, being involved with 30, 50, 100 people, is relationships.
Yes.
Our life, God created us for relationship. That's how he made us. He designed us. We have the faculty, the function, the ability, the capability of interacting with people, but we start with God. Our relationship is first with God and then with each other. And Georgia and I have found a way to change our attitude. And that's what changed. People didn't change too much, but we changed. God showed us how to do that. And it's been a fantastic experience of meeting people and dealing with people and changing your attitude, having the genuine love and care for people. And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
No.
I wouldn't want to go back to the the old guy.
I thought also one of the things that's interesting, you were in Dak Tao.
Yeah.
And we got to talking, and I was in Dak Tao.
At 37th, 3rd Battalion, 37th Artillery, move, shoot, and communicate. I don't know if you ever remember Sergeant Chafee, but he was in charge of telecommunications, and I got grabbed because I was a typist and I could, do administration. I was dragged into supply. And then my MOS was telecommunications security crypto specialist. So anyway, headquarters guided me. They came and Chafee grabbed me and said, "You're mine now," took me over to headquarters, and I became the crypto guy and message center clerk. And so that whole experience being in Dachau, you're walking, everywhere you walk, you're walking on people's graves. And the brutality and everything that was involved in that, how did you sense that?
I was a little more fortunate. I was north and part of the SOG operation. And so we had a little different. It was primarily monitoring the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Okay.
So it was a little different. It wasn't quite what you...
Well, our time is slipping away, and we just have a few seconds left, really. But, God is going to do his work, isn't he? He's got his hand on Israel. Israel is the center of everyone's attention right now. And we're for Israel. We want to support Israel, not because we agree with everything they do, or they're not even God's people in that sense. They're not saved. But God cares about them, and he's going to bring them into the land that he promised them, and he's going to take care of them. And our prayers and support is with Israel, and they're with all of you who are listening. We care about you. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for tuning in. Support us by telling people about our program and other programs on KXEX. We'll be here Monday morning. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Wild About Liberty with Terry Wild, only on KXEX 1550.